Hello. Whoa, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. As Andrew has quietly said, yes, I am indeed. My name is Andrew Barnabas, but everyone calls me Barn. And the Amiga and I, have you probably heard in the last talk, we have a long and wonderful history. So my talk will be in two halves. The first half will be a hitchhiker's guide to the demo scene and how it got me into writing music. But the second half will be a Q&A with my lovely assistant, Debbie McGee, and how the Amiga kick-started my career and, by proxy, brought me to Cambridge. So, my first question is, what is the demo scene? Anyone have a clue? I will quickly answer the question. Well, the demo scene originated on the Amiga's predecessor, the 64. Hackers, they would remove copy protection from games, replace it with their own splash screen, and distribute. So what started as a simple page of text, this quickly evolved. Flashing colours, scrolling text, pixel art, and logos, otherwise known as a cracktro. A programmer, also known as a coder, in demo scene parlance, will be showing off their graphical prowess, in addition to their ability to remove copy protection. I'll stand back now because you're at the front. And with the superb sonic and graphical capabilities of the Amiga, coders, artists, and musicians from the 64, just like me, a teenager who wanted to do something more creative with my home computer than just playing games, well, we upgraded. We got together and we formed groups and gave these groups and ourselves pseudonyms, initially to protect our identities because we were basically distributing cracked games. So, I found what I believe, there we go, the first ever cracktro. This was released in 1986, I think it was, and it was a crack for the game leaderboard. I remember this was a very good golf game of the era. Yeah, you can close it now. Very simple, someone's just copied the Amiga logo, their own bouncy ball, a bit of text and some scrolling in. That's it. You can close it, please. Thank you. And the music itself wasn't actually being generated by the Amiga. It was simply a looping sample, as someone pointed out, from Jean-Michel Jarre's album. So these cracktros, well, they evolved. They evolved into a standalone art form, which we called the demo. And many groups, they started to distance themselves from the cracking side of this, and they focused purely on creating these demos. So the demo was basically, well, it was a demonstration of one's ability. A real-time music video, a coder showing what they could do with the hardware, throwing text, fancy effects, 2D and 3D objects around the screen. Artists would help to design the demo and create beautiful imagery to accompany, and musicians, such as myself, well, we would bring all icing to this visual cake. So as folks got to grips with the hardware, these became more technically and aesthetically accomplished. So I first stumbled into the demo scene, well, from the 64. I was responding to ads wanting pen pals to exchange floppy disks in the back of Zap 64 magazine. One of the games I got had a cracktro on it, and one of the discs was in fact a demo. This was some mecha demo. This was some place I'd never heard of before. I got an Amiga in 1989, the infamous A500 Batman pack, which David Pleasance from earlier, he had a hand in creating. I responded to a local ad selling games, so I'm selling copies of games, and I met a member of a group. He was a member of a group called Freestyle, a local group in Croydon. This group changed its name to a group called Ecstasy, and I was asked to join as their musician. I picked the scene name Nightshade. Felt good to call myself. So at the time, I was studying music and I was playing instruments. But what enticed me to the Amiga were the sonic capabilities. They were much more advanced than anything else around at the time. 4 channels of 8-bit samples. Far more capable than chip music, bleeps and bloops of competing machines. One of the earliest programs to compose music was called Aegis, or Aegis, how you pronounce it, Sonics in 1987. Tunes were programmed using traditional music notation. It's a bit quiet. There we go. This is one of the demo tunes which came with it. If you scrolls on it, you can see it actually moving in the scrolls. But you see, it was using traditional notation. It was okay, but it was quite limited what you could do. All the samples had the same volume. There wasn't any effects on them. It was quite not very expressive. But folks in the demo scene, well, they went another way. They embraced a program called Ultimate Soundtracker, written by a chap called Carsten Obarski. It was rough around the edges, full of bugs, and originally released as a proper app. So demo scene programmers, what they did is they fixed the bugs and they created their own versions. This was far more suited to working with limited polyphony. Polyphony is how many notes, how many sounds you could play at one time. Aegis Sonics was more like working with MIDI in studios to control synthesizers and hardware. Play a crotchet C for a while, but there was no easy way to avoid notes being cut out when you hit your full note limit. Soundtracker instead adopted a piano roll interface, which showed you exactly what was playing on each channel at any given point, with the option to add commands. There we go. Look, he's done this perfectly. So this is the timeline. The pattern of data would scroll up, and these three are your notes and your octave. These two are your sounds, and these three numbers zeros were your effects. This was a far more suited to this kind of format. So my first demo with Ecstasy was a very simple affair showcasing the track I won my first competition with in 1990. And we discovered today that two of my friends here were actually at this same event in Barnsley in 1990. It doesn't sound quite so wonderful now that I say it out loud, but there we go. But this is there. So this is the first demo that I did for, yes, that's it, that's one, that's the one. That one, there we go. It's the first demo that Ecstasy did with my music on it. So I'll just scroll forward a little bit. So now we see I have Nightshade, Ecstasy. Can't really read. Ecstasy International Production. You can't quite see there, it's a bit dark. Some real-time reflections. Very advanced back in the day. I think I won the competition because folks didn't really expect to hear a bit of jazz coming from an Amiga. There we go. And a year later, Ecstasy were working on what we called a multi-demo. This was a disc which had 3 different demos on one disc at a time. Actually, this tune wasn't mine. It's Busy Paradise, Wonder Boy, and Greet's demo. So if you scroll forward a little bit, just load in the next demo. That's one of my tunes. These are copper bars, what these were called. These are called Bob's Blitter Objects. So like a little starfield made of balls, randomly. And now we've got, that's nice, a proper scrolly bit of tights now. There we go, Ecstasy. Smoothly scrolling. And now this wonderful bit of massive text will scroll up after this. It's very gaudy for the eyes. It feels like I'm in Japan. And this track's about to come in with a very out-of-tune piano, which I couldn't tune at the time. There we go. Let's keep scrolling forward now. That's demo 1. Second one, it's called Wonder Boy, which is showing what was basically this was taken from an arcade game called Wonder Boy. You had different patterns, you'll see different scrolling levels, more text things scrolling at me. There we go. Front the screen. A bit forward, a bit further forward. There we go. Oh no, that was a bit too far forward. Okay, fine. That's fine. Next one. There you got layers. That's when we'll get there. It's fine. It's all good. Move on to the next one. Next one, the final bit of the demo was what we call the Greets thing, which was done using a nice, beautiful looking flag, and another one of my tracks. There we go. So anyway, so that was my first. This is what the demo scene in the UK in 1990 was pretty much up to. Scroll forward a little bit, you get the nice flag. Beautiful, lovely flag. Beautiful flag. There we go. And each flag was different for each country, of course. And all they were doing was they were greeting different demo scene groups from around Europe. There we go. Wrap that one up, thank you. So I was really getting into writing Amiga modules. Modules was the name of the soundtrack, a file format. I come home after school every day, keep writing them. And I found YouTube versions of 2 of my tracks playing from the soundtrack of itself, showing how I wrote them. So the first one is called Heaven and Hell. This is the one I did for the Crusaders Euros. So you can see, there you go, in the middle. As the pattern went out, you can see the notes and the octave, the sample and the effects. 3 was speed, C was volume, A, all that stuff. So immediately the tracks became, I had a lot more expression, a lot more control over what I could do. So that was the drums. And the band, there was some strings and violin here. This track was done for what's called a disc mag, with the Euro chart, if anyone remembers the Crusaders Euros. This is my deep Jarre phase. And we could try it, if we quickly move on to the other track, it was called Boom. But if I pause it for 1 second, so pause. Okay. There we go. About in 1991, I formed a games music label with a friend I'd made in the scene. He went by the name Dark Elf, and I was Nightshade, so we took those 4 letters and became Dense Design. Here's a track I made from sampling instruments from all over the place because his dad had a great studio. And predominantly from a band called Squitty Politti, which some of you guys might remember from the name. Go on, let's play now. So my sample's a lot clearer now. I mean, the whole tune size is 284K. And I love slap bass. That'll do. Thank you. There we go. So I was fully ensconced in the demo scene. I was swapping games and demos in the post from folks all around Europe. I'd been asked to join a group in Norway called the Crusaders. So, prior to the internet, games and demos were distributed by post. And at meetups, they were known as copy parties. Here in the UK, that meant hiring a village hall for half a day, filling it with folks, their Amigas, and furiously copying discs. There's also spawned competitions. Best demo, best art, best music. The jazz track I played earlier was my first win. But the Scandinavians, well, they took these copy parties to new levels. Crusaders, the Norwegian group I was now a part of, they started an event in 1992 called The Gathering. They would rent an entire secondary school over the 5-day Easter period and fill it. The first year was such a success, they offered to pay me, my poor student days, to fly me over and join them in 1993. It would run 24/7. Most folks, mostly young guys, would bring a large part of their bedroom with them. So you'd have the Amiga, you'd have their TV, you'd have their sound system, you'd have their sleeping bags. And the food, the noise, the smell, it's hard to really describe. Here's a photo I found, I took from 1993. So they're all crammed in, they've got their little kind of logos on the board, everything else. As you can see, so just crammed in. You can't really see them sleeping in that, but yeah. Because no natural light, you'd never idea whether it was day or night. Very hard, man. Now, the Scandinavians, not only did they run much bigger copy parties, they also took the art of the demo to new heights. I'm going to show you 3 demos that demonstrate the progression of the art form. A Swedish group called Scoopex released a demo called Mental Hangover. It was far ahead of what we at Ecstasy were doing. We joked it was because of their dark nights and long winters, there wasn't much else to do. But in reality, they were just much better at it than we were. If you just double click on the screen, it gets full screen. Press F, full screen. There you go. You can't see those. Nice font. So now we have 3D. The first time we've seen 3D actually being used. Scroll forward a little bit, scroll on the demo. Let's see what they can throw glitter objects around. Just a bit more, scrolling forward. Here we go, a bit more of this. A bit further forward. Now we've got vectors. Proper now we're getting 3D. The tune was as mad as the name. Now you keep forward a bit, now we've got stencil vectors. So like some pseudo texturing. Keep going forward a bit forwards. There we go, forward. And there we go, proper actual now 3D textures running on a 500. There we go, you can close that one now. Right, there we go. So that was in 1990. In 1992, a group called Spaceballs, they released a demo called State of the Art. Now this was getting really close to what I think of as a music video. They'd invented some really clever tech where they could film dancers and they would capture their silhouette and turn them into field vectors, which they could run at a decent frame rate and use and do fancy effects. F again. This, for me, feels we're now getting close to like another Bond intro sequence. Really? It's a bit dark. State of the art. Yeah, turn the lights off would be much better, but I'm not sure we can do that. No. There we go, so we can probably, you get the gist. So, far more close to a real-time video. So in the ensuing years, there have been numerous improvements to the demo showing what the Amiga can do. But rather than show you a kind of incremental move forward, what I will show you, I'm going to jump forward to something much, much more recent. There's a group called Black Lotus. They've been going for 30 odd years. They have made many defining demos, but this was such a leap forward. For me, it was worthy of showing what can be done with a lowly A500. This was released in 2019. So 32 years after the 500 came out. There was a demo called Eon. For me, this is now kind of getting into slightly more art house imagery and sort of short film territory. Didn't exist when the Amiga came out. Let's just go forward a couple of bits because there's quite a long intro. That'll do. There we go. Stunning, yes. Real vibes of Terminator and the... Skip forward a little bit. There we go. So what they did here is an interesting thing, is where they took stills of people and they turned them into vectors which they could then animate. Slowly turn them into vectors. And move it around. That'll do. Thank you very much. So, and the gathering, speaking of demo parties, is still going strong. It's now actually referred to as a computer party. The venue moved in 1998 to the Viking Ship and Hammer, where they held the Winter Olympics. And the attendance is over 5,000, but they've never moved since. They filled it up, just keep it at 5,000. They still eat, drink, and sleep in the hall 24/7 over the Easter break with no natural light. You completely lose track of time. And there you go, it looks like now. I think that was last year's one. So yeah, it's crazy. So now you've seen the world of the demo scene. How did this translate into a career moving to Cambridge? This seems to be a good place to switch over to a Q&A.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So if you've liked what you've seen there about the demo scene, I can highly recommend the books from Edition 64K, which have gone back through the Amiga eras, looking at demos and including right up to date, including things like Black Lotus and also their demo scene at Logo Gallery, which is an amazing book full of beautiful Amiga art. So, Andrew, how did you get your first game commission?
Oh, God. Okay, right. So, talking about the fact that I was writing music on the demo scene. When I entered my customer competitions, there were people there who worked in the games industry. And so they heard my music and come up to me and said to me, have you ever thought about writing music for games? I'm like, I'm 16, no. But it kind of made me think, maybe there's something to this. I started contacting I rang up all the games companies which advertised in Zap 64, the Bible that all of us read. Of course, got the usual, yes, send a file in, we'll get in touch. No, they won't. But there was same time, there were 2 trade shows, about April or September time. In London, PCW, I forget the other name, the other one. And I go along there and try and look at new games. And put on a suit and just pretend that I was vaguely professional. And I put my company name of Dense Design on there. And I would go around and just originally just to look at games and trying to get a idea what was coming up next. There was a company called Accolade, and they were making a game called Test Drive, if any of you might remember. They were showing their latest version of it, and I remember saying, "Oh, can I have a go? Can I have a go?" So I'm sitting there playing the game when they desk it. And the woman in the stand looks at my badge and says to me, "So what can you design for us?" I went, "Excuse me, what?" She goes, "Dense Design." I went, "Oh yeah, we do music for games." "Oh, okay. Have you got a business card?" "No." "Have you got a show reel?" "No." "Have you got any?" "No, we had nothing at all." But I said, "Oh, but if you give us your details, we'll take it and we'll send you something." That was the catalyst. I went home that night, went to my friend's house, and we just copied loads of Amiga modules and a sound tracker player onto a floppy disk, and went round the next day to every stand we possibly could and just gave them. I don't know why I put it in an envelope for some reason. Gave an envelope with a floppy disk and go, "Hi, this is the music from which you might want to use in the game. Any interest, let me know." And about a month after that, it's September 1990, it was October 1990, I got a phone call from a company called Sales Curve. And they'd been finishing and developing a game, and they wanted to look for some title music. They brought me they said, "Come and visit us in the offices in Battersea." My mum gave me a piano tie, it was so cheesy. And I walked in with the piano tie, and I remember being incredibly nervous, because I was just about 17 at the time. I sat in the corner of the room, they had an Amiga 1084S monitor, and I just remember staring at the monitor. There were about 20 of them walking around me, much like most of the developers on the team, just laughing and joking, and I was just sitting there, just loading up Soundtracker and playing modules. If that's enough, play next one. It's enough, play next one. Just keep going. And they all went quiet over one tune, and I thought, that's it, I fucked it, I'm done, I'm game over now. But the guy who asked me knocked on my shoulder and said, "Can you have a chat?" And he goes, "We'd like to buy the music for this. Can we buy this tune for the type music for our game?" And I remember saying, "Fuck, really?" And I was like, "This is okay." And I was like, "Really?" And yeah, and that was exactly how it happened. That was it. And the tunes that I'd written were all tunes that I'd written for demos. The tune which they used was there was going to be a new Ecstasy demo called Decimation. I don't know what it was called there. And it was in 3 stages, and they wanted some kind of dark industrial thing, then they kind of slightly build up, and then a kind of a funky thing. And that is the tune which they ended up picking to use. And in fact, I found when I was taking to find the picture of the gathering, I found the game in my box at home. So I brought it with me to show you. So it was a game called SWIV, which, if anyone knows, was a spiritual successor to a shoot-'em-up called Silkworm, which was an arcade game by Tecmo, which was a helicopter and a jeep. That was a horizontal scrolling shoot-'em-up in the arcades. SWIV was a vertical scrolling shoot-'em-up, which you could play either the jeep or the helicopter. Helicopter was always better. And the interesting thing about it is that the real interesting tech thing about it is the guy who'd written it he'd loaded the game as you were playing it. So it was like one long level. So it was like, this is amazing. How could you do this? And it was a lovely thing for me where Zap 64, which kind of half inspired me, they had a music chart. And they kind of inspired me to get into this. And then my tune was #1 for 3 months. Get in. So I was on the map at that point. That was my first game. And here it is. So yes, here it is. I've got this on my track. Dark industrial. Nick's from Depeche Mode. Industrial bit. There we go. Into funk.
So, I mean, that seems like a good point to ask this question.
Oh, thank you.
Where did you get your samples?
Well, politely, I was a poor teenager, poor family, quoting Bohemian Rhapsody, and I had no musical hardware at all of my own. So it was a question of creative pilfering, is probably the best way of putting it. The great thing about swapping Amiga modules with demo scene musicians all around Europe is when the module would come as one file and it would have the pattern data and all the samples. So I could just nick all the samples. So I would made up my own samples, whatever. And so, for example, I forget where they were. So it was Depeche Mode, there was stuff from... and in fact, one of the guys who I used samples from is now also is a very well-known games composer called Jesper Kidd. I was in the same demo scene group as him, and he had a great studio. So I sent me tracks with his samples, and I would use all those. So basically, the samples were all stolen from wherever I could find them.
And so then you did 2 more Amiga games.
I did a couple. I think I did. Oh, okay, right. So yes, a year later, I did a game called Double Dragon, which you may know was an arcade conversion. This is another track I did for an Amiga demo. It's a conversion of a sideways scrolling beat 'em up in the arcade. That choir sample, at that point I was at sixth form college and had a music studio and I had this lovely Akai sampler. And so I ended with that particular sample, so I just sampled 4. I wrote the tune on my piano, home, and just sampled the 4 chords I needed. Did you? There you go. Just did it in my jar phase. And there we go. And then finally, a couple of years later, okay, we pause this 1 second. Let me talk about this. So at this point, I'd got together with a developer called John Twiddy, who made some really quite successful 64 games. And he was tasked by Virgin to convert a number of their games from, I think it was the SNES and everything else, to the Amiga and the PC and everything else. And so I did Global Gladiators, Cool Spot, another one I can't remember, and Aladdin. Now, Aladdin, I was like, okay, obviously, it's, as we know, if we all know, it's from the 1994 film. Robin Williams was the genie, a big Disney film at the time. So the game originally came out on the Mega Drive, but I said I could probably do a little bit more because the Mega Drive had less powerful sound hardware than the Amiga did. So I don't know how I managed to get hold of it, but I spoke to Alan Menken, the composer, on the phone. He faxed me the entire score to Aladdin. So it came and it was like, I don't know how I was supposed to squeeze this into 4 channels on the Amiga, one of which was going to be shared by sound effects. But one thing I did do, because I got to know the developer pretty well at this point, I said, I have an idea. This could work. It's going to take a lot of memory to load, but it could work. At that point, you have very rarely heard anything other than what you would call instrumental tracks on the Amiga. This, I said, I think I could do something here. People won't expect it. Play. This is Whole New World, that's kind of the most famous song from the film. Because I've got there, bless Alan, so I got stems of the scores from the film, and I managed to somehow squeeze that onto an Amiga. And actually one of my lovely moments, because it took 300k to load that, which was a lot back in those days. But they said, trust me guys, it's going to be worth it. And in fact, 2 magazine reviews pointed it out. They said, I think it was a magazine called Zero, if anyone remembers that. I said it was one of gaming's finest ever moments was when they suddenly heard that come from the speakers, because you never heard that coming from a game before. Here we go. So that was my last game on the Amiga.
And so then what brought you to Cambridge?
What brought me to Cambridge? When I was doing this, I was studying for a degree in music up in Leeds. And at that point, I was freelancing, doing anything else. But the games industry, as many of you probably know, it's kind of mirrors how film and TV industry used to be 50 years ago, where everyone was on staff. So I could become a staff composer, where these days, obviously, everyone's freelance. So at that point, I'd been doing freelancing about 4 or 5 years. So I thought, you know what, I'm about to graduate, I'll look for a job. So I went to the trade show, I think it was April 1995, and I said, I'm looking for a job now. I said, oh, you'd moved? Yeah, I said, we'd moved to you. At that point, I'd done 5 or 10 games, so I was known. Much to my annoyance of my housemates, I got offered 3 jobs. And one in my hometown, it was an interesting nexus point in my life. One in my hometown, because I think my last freelance job before I moved was I worked on a game called FIFA 96. It was a conversion of the SNES. They went to the consoles. And the company which converted was called Probe Software, who were based in Croydon, my hometown. And when I finished doing the conversion, they offered me a full-time job. And I thought, ooh, and it was a lot. It was twice the money they offered me at the other place. But I decided to go to the other place because of the prospects. The other place was, of course, here in Cambridge. I had I'd known one of the guys who started the company, co-founded the company, Ian Saunter. I'd met him at trade shows in 1991, and I'd pop in every now and then and say, hi, Ian, look, no, we're going to still use Richard Joseph. It's fine, will you do that? Okay. But then they were just finishing off a studio, and I said, well, actually, I'm looking for a full-time job. But he goes, actually, we're finishing building a studio. They had a producer there who just loved building studios. They told him it would cost 50 grand. It cost 400 grand. And I mean, looking back on it, it's insane. So I moved to Cambridge the weekend of Strawberry Fair in 1995. And effectively, they gave me the keys to this £400,000 studio, which is insane for a 22-year-old. But now, looking back on it, Ian and I got on really well, and it turned out, I discovered a couple of years later, his favourite bit of games music was my higher score music from SWIV. So I think that probably helped.
So then, obviously, you need to talk about the games of Millennium, and one in particular, one of them probably...
Well, okay, they had made their name originally, I think it was from Logotron. They originally made their... remember Logo at school? The little turtle moving around that was it. But then they developed into a games company called Millennium Interactive, and their most successful franchise of games was called James Pond. A lovely riff on James Bond, but licensed to Gill. And this is from the second game, called Robocod. It's the same theme tune as the film Robocop, completely the same bit of music. It's made here in Cambridge. And also, interesting bit of sponsorship, Penguin. First time I'd ever seen proper actual sponsorship on a game. If you scroll forward a little bit, you can see a little bit of the game. There we go, you see? It's pretty smooth scrolling at the time, pretty good. Decent graphics. So basically, a fish in Robocop's outfit. There we go. Yeah, so that's probably their most famous franchise, I think, from Millennium.
Of course, they also developed the series Creatures.
Oh, they did indeed. So there was one of the developers there who was working remotely called a guy called Steve Grand, and he was like, I'm spending years working on what he called digital DNA. It was an artificial life experiment. Very, very early days compared to this is 1995, 1996. And they released a game called Creatures. Creatures was the first sort of artificial life experiment. The game would come on CD, but the eggs would come on floppy disk. You have to put the eggs in, and they would hatch, and these creatures called Norns, which you could then try to sort of nurture through the world. You'd feed them, you'd give them different stimuli, and they would learn. They would speak languages and something else. I don't know how much it was true, how much it was bollocks, but it seemed to be quite good at the time. It was very successful. And But the interesting twist about this, which brings it bang up to date, is if you guys are familiar with a TV show called Black Mirror, Charlie Brooker's wonderful show, this year's Black Mirror, season 7, which came out in April time, there was an episode 4, called Playthings. And everyone watching it going, this is very, very familiar. And it turned out that Playthings was a complete direct rip-off. So he was inspired by Creatures. Turned out, in 1996, Charlie Brooker had reviewed Creatures for PC Magazine and loved it, so this is the future. So on the bottom, this is the Creatures game. These are the Norns, and they would give them food and everything else. And in fact, the model, this was actually built as a proper full-on model. I think it was in this museum at some point.
Yes, it's in the museum today.
It's in behind there. There we go, somewhere looking earlier. And so that's Creatures. And above it, we have Thronglets. Similar concepts. You have creatures, you would hatch them all, and you would learn to play with each other and everything else. Being Black Mirror, it goes a lot darker towards the end of it. Yeah, so that brings it bang up to date.
And so then from Millennium, you moved on?
Well, Millennium got bought by Sony. Larger, fun enough, the same guy who made Robocod, James Pond, was a guy called Chris Saul. He then developed a series of games called Medieval, which was an interesting take, because he loved the era, full stop. He also loved Ghosts and Goblins and Ghouls and Ghosts, which were big. I think they were Konami arcade games from the 80s, but moving into the 3D era. So basically, we were going to be a title for the PlayStation, which had enough 3D grunt at those days to actually do it properly. So yes, so Medieval was kind of like a sort of take on the arcade kind of slash game from the 80s, mixed with 3D, but designed and visual inspiration from Nightmare Before Christmas, the Henry Selick and Tim Burton project, which you worked on as well, Matt. So yes, and in fact, they released, I think it was 4 games in the Medieval franchise, from 1998 on the PlayStation 1, 1990, 2000 on the same PlayStation 1, PSP, one of the launch titles, PlayStation Portable, and then most recently, in 2019, this is the intro from the PS4 version, which was released on 2019, developed by Over Ocean, whose offices are next to Pixar. He's a bad dude. Right? He's annoyed. He was the conjurer for the king. Got kicked out for doing some bad shit. Got annoyed. He's now found a new spell called Evernight, which will turn the whole inhabitants of the town Galamir into his personal army. I mean, he looks so friendly. Wrapping up the time, so maybe we want to wrap it up at this point, because it's...
So nowadays, of course, you're working with orchestras, you're working with...
I am very lucky. I mean, that was a whole week with an orchestra and a choir. It was an insane experience. And I spent a month in LA mixing it, and now in San Francisco. So it's incredible how, coming from Amiga in my mum's bedroom to doing this 20, 35 years later.
And a project you're working on at the moment is the Sensible Band.
Yes, absolutely, which you'll hear us play later, by the way. But fun enough, it was kicked off again by the Amiga, because 10 years ago at the Amiga 30th celebrations, there were events going around loads of places celebrating it. And one of them was happening by a friend of mine, the demo scene was running it in Amsterdam. And it was like, you should come. At that point, I was doing more film and TV, not so much into games. But the closer we got to the event, people I hadn't spoken to in 20 years had come out of football and said, you should come. You were part of this, come along. looked on the website, saw that John was listed as a VIP. And he lives not far from me. He lives about 20 minutes away from me. So I said, rang him and said, should we go? Do you want to travel together? You know, he lives in Stansted. He rang me like 2 weeks later. He has an insane life. And he rang me, he goes, yeah, I'm going. But they've just asked me to play. Do you want to come and play with me? Play what? Oh, just some of my tracks from games. Because even though he's a legend for designing in games, but he's always at heart a musician. He's always worked on a lot of the scores for the games. He's always writing songs all the time. And so we ended up turning it into a road trip. We did 7 countries in 9 days. We became a duo, John and Barn, playing basically songs from his games. Now, about just over a year or so ago, you know what, we could do an album now. It's time. The time is right. Let's do an album. So he's written all the songs. And we recorded them, because half my band, I think we told earlier, are based in Poland because of this big event, Pixel Heaven, which is where this is from. And so half of them are Polish. 2 minutes left. I'll be wrapping this up, based in Poland. So we recorded it. And this is me 2 weeks ago. I am recording the strings. Yes, so, in fact, it's the first time I'd ever actually conducted. I did that 2 weeks ago. And I thought I was going to do it, because it's, even in Prague, this is where we were filming, it's still 1,000 an hour. So we'd hired a conductor, because I normally sit in the studio just doing this, like I air conduct like a loon. And, but the guy, I said, you know what, you should have a go. So I said, okay, I'll have a go, but please stand behind me, because I fucking up, I want you to take over immediately. So yeah, but actually it turned out I kept going this. So apart from the first track, I did all the rest of the tracks. So I conducted for 4 hours, and I was like this after the end. Yes, that was 2 weeks ago. There you go. It's 1 minute to 5. We're good? There we go. Timed it perfectly.
Yeah. And I'd like to say thank you to Andrew Barnabas, for his talk, and just to remind you that John and Andrew will be playing a set later on. And will be just a short break, and then John Hare will be talking. So thank you very much.
Thank you.